Oh, I thought we were having something up on the
Hello, can you
screen.
hear us there, Jen?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Oh,
Well, you can see me now because I have
I
my
can,
laptop. So you may
I
not
can
be
s-
able to see us tonight. I'm just gonna go on off camera because we don't have Jared and his laptop. So you're stuck with,
we don't have the tech man.
stuck with the camera on my laptop, but I need this to type, so we'll just record the audio.
we did that last time, right?
That's right. We did.
Yeah, it works out fine.
How are you tonight?
Everyone in my house is sick.
Oh,
Seems like a common
Jared, I think, is
problem right
here
now.
As well, because it's a very similar situation, so it's the time of year. But hey, I'm an optimist, so I would look at it this way. You're gonna get it all out of your house before Christmas.
You would look at it what?
I'm an optimist, so I'm hopeful that you can get the sickness out of your house before Christmas and before the holidays.
We are hopeful as that as well.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Yep.
Rory, can you hit the volume button a little bit on that for Jen?
If I knew which one it was, I could, yeah.
One of them.
That's the mic.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think, yeah.
Well, I don't think anybody's on the call, are they, Jen? Anybody from?
Nope,
Go ahead.
Okay,
just you guys.
okay. All right, then I'm going to go off camera and then we are going to start the music here. All right, let's stand and say the pledge. Pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so let's see, first point of order, Mike Coffey has put his resignation in, so he is no longer part of the ZAC. He sadly has a lot going on and it's really a struggle for him to make these meetings, so he sent me a note saying he's unable to make anything going forward, so Mike will be missed.
Yes, he will.
Hey, Darvin.
Hey, Darvin.
Hello.
I also received an email that I'll read out from Chris, and that's basically the topics that we'll cover tonight. And this will orientate us. He had two topics for us, so I will refresh everyone's memory here. Oh. The question for Zach is whether you want an open space district created. Now, some points of discussion. Doesn't think it's strictly necessary, which he's previously said. Reason being that if there's a public park located in a residential district, it seems extremely unlikely that the village would redevelop the park into a single family homes. In addition, there could be other types of caveats that keep open space as open space outside of zoning. Second point, that being said, seeing open space districts more often in zoning codes as recent examples, so would not be out of the norm for a village wants to create one.
Hey, can I throw something in here?
Yes, please.
Keep in mind that we have an open space over in Colonial Hills, and we tried very hard to put in a bench, and that was met with a lot of drama and a lot of pushback. So defining what you mean by open space, even though, you know, no one's gonna build single family homes in it, but you may want to get a little bit more specific as to whether or not there is pedestrian, I don't know, accoutrements available or allowed in such spaces, because right now there isn't verbiage that addresses that, and we ended up with a big problem last time we tried to put in a bench. So just throwing that out there.
Okay. Thank you, Jen.
Yep.
All right, that being said, I don't see a great benefit to an open space district. But he doesn't see harm. We'd have to update the map, add language, the code regarding the district standards. Next point is if the village wants this type of district, I would recommend it only be applied to municipal land, not undeveloped land, privately owned. The latter would have major effects on property valuations and investments, and would need a lot of input from these landowners. So there's that one. That's the first one. Second one is highway commercial district. It would be helpful to have direction from the ZAC on their desired characteristics of this district. There were different thoughts from the public forum. that's fine, although I think it's still still retain the strip mall field district, just dress it up a bit if the landowner decided to redevelop it. So some things to consider. Oh, that's right. Sorry, I skipped over this. Maryland, I recall, was focused solely on beautifying the frontage. Example, more landscaping, but otherwise not making any changes. He's saying that's fine, although he would think it would likely still retain that strip mall feel of the district, just dress it up a bit if a landowner decided to redevelop it. So here's some things for us to consider. This isn't a traditional downtown roadway, so having a deeper frontage setback makes sense as portion can be used for better landscaping. I think it would be preferable for future development to locate parking in the rear and side of the building. This seems more in keeping with the visual preference from the comprehensive plan. Another point, do you want to allow mixed use in development? There are some comments from the forum that desire this. I personally think it does make sense for the village, but this is a village decision. This is an emerging trend where developers combine big box and other type of commercial spaces. For example, what is there today with residential? If so, questions that need to be considered is what the desired balance. Some communities require a certain percentage of development to be commercial. This can be a bit complicated to determine what is the right balance. What is the right balance? Others require ground floor to be commercial. The downside of this approach is I've seen examples where developers are willing to allow ground floor vacancy, lack of sufficient demand, because financial impacts are offset by residential uses. And then the last point here is require commercial along the frontage with residential at the rear of the lot. So those are the two topics Chris would like input on. So let's start with the first one, open space districts.
Sounds like he's saying that it's really not anything necessary, and I agree, or it's not like we're gonna put something in a park, so why muddy things up and make more? From the zoning perspective, and Rory speak on the planning perspective, I think that we need to focus more on better requirements for the zones we have versus creating new zones. I mean, obviously, nobody's gonna put a house in Wiswall Park. That's foolish and silly to even think of, so I, for one, don't think that we need to have a special district for it.
But I disagree. I feel like we need to have, especially what's happening in the towns of Malta, Milton, and Boston, cramming us in. We need to have designated open space that no one's going to take over. I mean, there's no more trees left. We also have to take into consideration that Milton is about to, where we're talking about the front, I know it's the second question, but they're about to be mixed use right before we enter. So we're talking about adding more, just taking away any open space, any greenery we have. It's happening all around us. I feel like it's very important to designate, or at least make sure that it stays the way it is. Because what happens if, Kelly Park becomes a desirable place? There's no real protection.
Margaret, in the village, what properties would you want to do that to? Other than Wiswell Park and up by Colonial Hills, you have other properties that you think that we would?
Kelly Park
Kelly Park, okay.
and the Old Iron Springs. Hold on, Marilyn mentioned something because I can never remember.
Everything that the village pretty much owns that's open, it's pretty much like a.
Correct.
Open space now. Then,
I just feel like it should be designated open space.
I think we need to talk more about, and I don't think I'm personally prepared to do this tonight, but I think if we were going to create something like that, we would need to talk more about what an open space designation in terms of zoning would mean, what the benefits of that would be, what the downsides of it would be. I think potentially, and this is off the top of my head, I don't know that this would be the case, which is why I say I'm not prepared to talk about it tonight. I imagine there would be some advantages to applying for grants to improve open space if you had a specific designation. I don't know that that's the case. It might be fine with it being a park space under the village's current designation. So I'd like to get more information about what the actual advantage could be. I have to agree, I don't see a particular advantage to it with the information that I have now, but I think there's a possibility there could be ways that it could be done where it could be beneficial.
Byron?
I don't know if I agree with you, Tim, because we don't have enough information to rule it out either. So if there was a potential for something, we could apply for a grant and get more funding and more resources to enhance these areas. And if we didn't spell those out, would we be missing out on those opportunities? Is what I would like to know and not rule it out.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's, yeah,
So we agree.
totally agree with what you're saying.
All right. So then the other bit is, what about other places that we would want to add? Would it be beneficial to have those created and then add them additionally later? Is my question.
I think I empathize with what Margaret says, and I certainly don't see Wiswall Park being a high rise. I do, however, think that whether it's open space or some better zoning, we have two parcels that haven't been mentioned that are enormous, that would potentially be open for all types of development. The first one is the fairgrounds. The fairgrounds is an enormous piece of property with a ton of acreage. And it may stay the fairgrounds forever, as far as I know, or it may not. The fair may or may not be financially viable 5 or 10 years from now. And if it's not,
No.
okay, then we need to be able to have some definition of what we would consider to be acceptable in that area. And the other parcel, which again, right now is soccer fields, but
Yeah.
it's an enormous parcel that sits off of Hyde Boulevard, owned by the school district. It's not inconceivable to me that at some point in the future, the school district could decide that they wanted to consolidate their campus, okay, and sell that parcel. Right now, it's zoned R1.
What is the fair zone as?
R1.
No, Roy, I think though, I thought about the park situation there too, but I think they're just talking about village property, correct?
That was one point I was going to make.
I'm not sure of that.
I think it's a
Yeah.
question of whether we are just talking about
Well, that's
village
why I brought
property
it
or
up.
Yeah,
we're not.
I forgot.
Yeah.
Well, in his
I
thing,
didn't
he
even
said
talk
just
about
a
Eastern Ave
municipality.
because of that.
just
Oh,
a
yeah, municipality owned.
I think he asked whether we were talking about just the
Oh,
municipality
I
or not
thought
the
he
municipality.
said just municipality.
Right,
That's
yes.
what he mentioned, 'cause he would.
And clearly, the school district is not the is an entity, but it's not the municipality. And the fair is owned by the board. Again, it owns a parking lot within the village, which is gigantic, as well as its grounds, which are gigantic. It owns a parcel outside towards the sheriff's department, which is probably another 20 acres of parking. But as we look at the zoning for those areas, I think that I'm not sure open space is necessarily a definition, but I do think that those areas are different than the rest of the village, because frankly, there is no green space in the rest of the village.
Right.
Okay, we are essentially landlocked. There's very little area we could. I mean, Milton and Malta could build right up to us because they own it.
Right, but then we'd have nothing.
So I got three.
Well, I'm not arguing. We have nothing now.
No, I know, but I'm saying, I forgot about the school district. I didn't think about the school district owning it, but if they do sell.
Well, they
then-
could, and I'm not advocating anything else other than if we're gonna think broadly and in the future, those are the only two pieces of green that I can think of that the village has. That is even remotely worth talking about regulating, or at least having some level of control over. Because we don't have any other green space.
Wait,
Well,
wait,
probably
you're
park.
talking about Bark still and the fairground, the village doesn't own that.
I didn't say they did,
Okay,
but this is broader than the village owning it.
Well, that's not what he said. If you
So
read
it
he
is.
said-
Hey, guys, again, I don't mean to interrupt, but something else, something that Rory something Rory said made me think about is, do you also want to include any development coming in and a percentage that they are required to make green space? If someone comes in and develops Angelica, or someone comes in and wants to develop the the retirement community, this would be your opportunity to say, well, if you're gonna come in and develop, you have to give us, 10% of
That's
whatever it is
plant.
you're developing has to be green space. So you may want to add that to give some green space back to you.
So Chris's point, on this topic, he says, I'll just reread it. If the village wants this type of district, I would recommend that it only be applied to municipal land, not undeveloped land owned by private landowners. That would
Right.
have major effects on their property values and investments. For example, if they were allowed to build a commercial building, but now must keep as undeveloped open space and would need
Right.
a lot of input by these landowners.
Exactly.
So,
That's point
But,
one.
but I think that is talking specifically about private property. I think the school district is still a muddy question and.
Well, it's not owned by municipality, so therefore it's all.
Yeah, but I think in terms of what he's intending there is not necessarily to exclude the.
Two, I think the
Disagree
school
with that.
district's a school district.
Yeah,
It's
it's a private
it's
entity.
not the village.
But the other half of what he was saying there was, we don't want to zone private property as, so woods owned by a private citizen
I agree
as
with that.
green space.
Yeah.
I don't think that the dichotomy he was presenting there was just what the village owns versus anything else, including, for instance, that school district owned field.
He made it pretty clear, it's municipal land versus everything else.
but he doesn't know what that land is.
No, because he made it very pretty clear by saying municipal land versus private land.
Yeah, but what do you mean he doesn't know? He's our consultant. Of course he
So,
knows.
so,
He
so
Why
knows
wouldn't
that
he know?
The
point
East,
number two.
Eastern Ave
Point
is
number
a,
two, he doesn't, what he's saying here is, he doesn't recommend it. That's his
Right.
professional opinion. He caveated that by saying if you really want it, he has some input, but his personal opinion is his professional opinion is he doesn't recommend it.
I
Number
disagree.
point three is, I believe we talked about specifically after the public forum, we talked about this specific point. Marilyn raised that, hey, Chris, how come I don't see open spaces designated on this map? And when I remember, we had multiple conversations. We actually had a second conversation because Marilyn didn't remember the first, so we talked about it twice. And that fact is, no, Marilyn, this is not a district issue, it is a use issue, and that's why they weren't represented on the map. So I guess that point is, we talked about that already. Number one, that's third point. And we arrived on that as a use issue, not a district or / zoning issue,
But he's
Right.
asking it for as a zoning issue.
which he recommends against it. And we've already
So?
talked about it. And so we thought it was a use issue, not at the same time. So we've already talked about this essentially.
I just disagree. I feel like it should be designated space. Because in my neighborhood, where the Eastern Ave, the park is, I don't want a new development. If the school
You talking
district
about Kelly
sells,
Park?
no, I'm talking about the Eastern Ave rec field.
Well,
If
what-
the school
okay.
district sells it, then they can zone R1. And the only green space we have are skating rink. Anything else will be gone.
Yeah, but that's a rec field and that's owned by the school. I mean.
But
can
if
do
they
what
sell,
want.
so if we say it, that continues to be R1 with a carve out for open space.
No, you can't do that. I think like I
Or
said, you can't
designated
do
an
that
open
to private
space.
property or even just the village owned property, if you're gonna do it with anything. You can't take. like,
The school
hers-
district is not private property.
Well, it's public, I understand, but it's not owned by the village. That's my point.
It's not-
all right?
it's not
owned by the
municipal.
village. You're
He's
playing
drawing that
semantics.
distinction.
I mean, by that argument,
Whatever
we shouldn't have
owned by-
zoning at all. So
Excuse me?
by that argument, we shouldn't have zoning at all. If we can't, I mean,
Well, that's what he's, in his, if you read it, that's what it says, what's ever owned by the village.
no, what he said was municipal versus private property, and that leaves a whole gray area in the middle of things that are not village property, but are also not private property.
I think you're splitting hairs because his recommendation.
I am not. He was very explicit in terms of the two categories he
No,
defined.
he's not. I
He
just-
said private, he used the words private property and he used the words municipal property, correct?
Let's see.
So I am not splitting hairs. He said two very
I think you are,
specific
'cause his
things.
general recommendation is not do it at all. So let's not even go down this rabbit hole because that's his recommendation not to do it.
Well,
But I
okay.
disagree
I
with the
think
recommendation.
generally, I would say, I think we do not have enough information and we need to have a larger discussion about this.
What
By
other
private
information do you
landowners.
I
have?
think I just very specifically said the information that I think I would like to have.
Which is,
I think that I would like to know more about the impacts of this on getting money for park spaces. I'd like to know the difference between whether we are talking about municipal versus all other property or municipal versus private property. I think there are a couple of other things that we said when Darvin and I were speaking. But I think there are a number of things. I think that this is not an offhand discussion. I think that there is the possibility of this having a big impact on several spaces, a big impact on whether those spaces can be something that can be used as something that is a value to the village versus something that just sits there. I think that it's something that we should have a more informed conversation about rather than just taking two sentences and saying that let's throw it out or not throw it out.
Well, what's gonna happen is we're gonna run out of time, and he's gonna do whatever. He's gonna throw in the language if we don't get back to him in time. That's,
Say, we disagree. We'd like
Or
to
we
have more
could say that this
information.
is something that we think is worth having a wider discussion about and making time for it.
we're gonna do this again when he comes back next week with more questions on different topics.
Sure, I thought he was gonna be here tonight. I thought that was, Marilyn said, I'm sorry, I didn't see you, that's
Oh,
right.
Marilyn got that idea.
Okay.
That was never- that was-
Okay, the way to deal with that is to say, we have questions about this. What are the questions? What are the answers we need? What is the information we need? And say who is going to get that information, and someone will get that information. Not just say we're going to run out of time, so let's ignore it.
So I already beat you to the punch, and I already have these questions listed here.
Okay, great.
It's not gonna help the timeline concern. I can ask him for that. He can get back to us with those answers, but I'm gonna ask him what his timeline, when does he need these questions answered by? But there's gonna be a lot more questions like this. So I think,
Yeah, and I think,
There are, and that's what we're doing.
well,
We're not gonna. have
further to that, I think that the question really, in addition to all that we have, is what do we do with these two particular parcels in terms of zoning?
Does the county own?
All right, because if we haven't gone into the PDD concepts or any of those types of things, but essentially, if our zoning consultant can give us recommendations as to percentages of green space that are desirable or recommended for future development, I think that would offset a great deal of the concern if and when these properties ever became available. But it's really a zoning issue and a planning issue more than anything else. Now, the green space that we have may or may not be eligible for more grants and all of the rest of that. And if there's a way to create other pocket parks or that kind of thing with grant money, I'm all for it. I think that's wonderful. But I think realistically, when one looks at this village, there's very little green left. And we can't create it. We're landlocked.
Roy, which two parcels were you talking about? Going back to the school parcel?
The school, as I looked at the big picture, okay, years ago, those two parcels stood out to me
Which is the
as
school and what's the other?
the school and the fairgrounds.
Okay.
Okay, right now they are what they are, and they've been that way for a long, long time.
Right.
But if the fair, let's just say the fair fell on hard times, okay? And I certainly hope that doesn't happen, but if it were to, and they decided that they needed to sell some or all of the land, the zoning out there is, I believe, all R1. Okay, that may be something we want to look at.
Well, actually, right now, it's kind of multi-use, isn't it? Mixed use, because they store.
I'm not
things.
even sure, well, they do whatever they want.
Yeah, 'cause,
okay?
I mean, they have storage, they do all the kinds of other events there.
Oh, I understand that they do all of that.
Is that the county? Does the county own that?
No, it is owned by the Saratoga County
Historical.
Fair
Okay.
Commission or whatever the hell they call
Got it.
themselves.
Okay,
And
All right.
for $40, I think you, $25, you can join the board and be a voting member. It's
all right, so I've got here, so we're at a disagreement. So I'm gonna send this back to Chris. We're at a disagreement. Asking Chris if there's any particular advantages of having an open space district, for example, like based on funding or based on funding and classification or any other advantage. What is the difference between municipal? Can you clarify difference between municipal versus private versus school district, similar type properties? And then specifically, there's concern around two particular parcels, the school soccer fields and the fairgrounds, and want clarification on clarification and recommendations on what to do about these two specific properties.
there you go.
That sound?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
I
good.
take feedback whenever I get from Chris and forward on to
That's
us.
good.
It's his job.
Sure.
I wish he hadn't sent us down a rabbit hole right off the bat.
Seriously, like, he's the professional. Just tell us what you think.
If you say this is not gonna be worth our time, don't bring it up.
Yeah. I
Let's
know.
move on quickly. We have a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yep. Yep, I agree.
Let's keep going. But when we need that info, we can make a decision quicker instead of.
Yep, all right, so I will send those off. Hopefully you can get those quickly turned around for us. All right, the next one, Highway District. So to reiterate, he thinks mixed use is a good idea, parking in the back side, and mixed use is good, parking in the sides and back, and a farther offset or frontage to beautify it. That was his general recommendation, but he's looking for our input on that.
So, what I think he's talking about is he's talking about from, is it Carousel Village down?
We don't know. That's what I was asking earlier. I don't
Right,
know
'cause-
exactly what he's talking about.
Because if the Ted's Fish Fry comes, they're gonna use that parking lot anyway, because they're gonna, right? They're gonna be their parking lot is the, behind the grass.
It's the same parking lot that's there now, yes.
Yeah, so but it's actually gonna get used.
Well,
But so what else?
I think is,
That's
from what
so
I
I'm
would
confused.
understand, that would be like for future development, right? I mean, it's not like
right, I think.
stuff
that
that's already there, and then we would run into a problem when he's talking about setbacks. A lot of those lots. I mean, let's just take Ricketts, for example.
Mhm.
Ricketts is not very
Setback.
deep, so you can't set back and, I mean, maybe you can go back 10 feet, put some bushes out front, but if you're gonna have parking in the rear,
It's
Would-
gonna
you
be
can't
right
go
on the
back
front.
25 feet and then expect to have parking in the rear. So some of that
It won't
he's
be
mentioning
parking.
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
No, and conversely, at the south end of town, okay, we have this line, I would, for lack of a better term, where Milton comes right up to the cemetery on one side and basically that cul-de-sac on the other, with commercial. And then all of a sudden it's residential coming into the village. There's no transition,
Yeah,
there's
there's no
nothing.
five,
yeah.
that's not he can't be talking about that part.
Well,
No,
but he.
Cameron-
he
Well,
very
I
well
think
could
there are
be.
parts of it where it would make
Yeah,
sense,
right.
just not as consistently as the
Correct.
other side of
Yeah.
town.
No, but it's such a dramatic change,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
The reality is at the cemetery, there's one street, Trumbull, and one parcel. Okay, that's it. And then there's another house, and then it starts to get weird as it goes down. And conversely, on the other side, you've got a cul-de-sac and really more residential going down towards the
that's
And
church.
it's the village starts at like 2/3 of the cemetery too, right?
Well, that's a good question, okay? The village
Well,
signs
that's where
aren't
the sign
accurate
is.
either.
Right,
okay?
that's-
For example, on the north end, the village sign is right in the middle of the job lot parking lot, when in reality, it's past where Ted's Fish Fry is going, where the Pizza Hut is.
Right.
Okay, so the sign's in the wrong place, okay? I don't know about the site, I know, that's exactly how I feel about it. It's insane, okay? I don't know about the sign
I
on
think
the
he's
other
really
end.
Using the use case for the job lot parking lot. I think that's the photos of the public forum. In his mind, it sounds like that's what he's describing is what do you do with that?
Well,
And it makes sense because it's clear that that is a
Yeah.
dramatically distinctive area. It's different than anywhere else in the village and it makes sense for it to have different zoning.
Yeah.
I don't know what the right zoning is for it. I don't know what I'm personally very conflicted as to what I think the right thing to put there is, but it's clear that it's different and it should be different.
But even still, if you can't have, I don't even see, because again, Ted's Fish Fry is gonna use part of it. And if you want the parking in the back, so parking for the Ocean State job lot and potentially something else in the front, it's all just gonna be one, and it's not gonna be very far from the road either, correct?
No.
Well, the parking would be between Ocean State and whatever else could possibly come in up front.
How much we talk, how deep is that lot?
It's
Pretty
deep.
deep,
Deep, but I
It's
don't
gotta
think
be
anything.
300
would
feet
come
easy.
unless Ocean State decided to subdivide.
Well, yeah, or
Well,
sell off,
that's-
sell off
They
a
certainly
pad.
could and put a little strip
That's
mall right up
probably the
front.
case what we're thinking about there, because that's a big parking lot that's frankly never used other than putting snow on.
Right.
Maybe that's the case.
That'd be so hard to subdivide. It's a very inclined, well, whatever.
Oh,
But you
yeah.
that would be,
So-
that Ricketts and that would be the property, maybe the property adjacent from all these. where
Coles
that-
Collision, knows,
that
who
one
knows what
going,
it,
yeah.
So this is what he says. He says, just to reiterate, having a deeper front setback makes sense and a portion can be used for better landscaping. I think it would also be preferable for future development to locate parking in the rear side and side of the building. This seems more in keeping with the visual preferences from the comprehensive plan.
The problem is.
And
Except it's physically impossible in both
Mixed-use
of those sites to do
Exactly.
that.
Mixed-use development makes sense based on some comments from the forum that desired this.
Oh, I didn't really see that part, but
But again, next to the Ocean State, you've got the strip mall and in front of it, a bank. All right, there's no room for anything to be done with that. And then I think there's the
The
water
CVS.
service building there, and the CVS.
So we're talking about right here, right?
They are,
yeah.
So between. This is the strip mall and then there's job lot, right? Ocean State.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that parking lot when I think this.
This is the area we're talking. about,
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
If I can, in my brain. Sorry, it can be pretty scary thought. I mean, what I did with Pizza Hut, people aren't gonna park there, they're gonna park all the way over
well,
a quarter of it. So do you tell them not to park there? What do
no,
we,
it's,
no,
You just park them in the back.
it's a, it's a,
Whatever's, yeah, right.
in
it's
the back of whatever?
it's a
could
commercial space.
possibly
It's
go
always
there?
been used, okay, as parking for that,
Okay,
that building.
seems like,
Well, it used to be a Grand Union way back when.
oh, yeah.
I
I know,
think
I
what
used
we're
to go there
talking
all the
about that right now doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what's there right now, right? We need to know how much space is there and think if there were to be
Well,
anything
yeah,
else
if you
put there,
scroll-
what would we
if
want
you
to see?
Scroll down, yeah, that's it, there you go. And you start to look at, okay, all of the green space behind of those buildings,
Which is,
okay?
Basically a cliff.
It's right, well,
Right.
it drops off rather
Exactly.
dramatically, and as you head out Rowland,
Nothing I can build out here.
there,
or north past, as we go north.
by
all right, We're
Benedict,
now outside the village, after the orange
Yeah, we're
roof,
outside.
we're outside the village, so it doesn't matter.
and they're gonna build what, mixed use? In those trees anyway, aren't they?
I don't think so.
No, I thought that's what the plan was for the town of Milton.
Well, they don't own that. They own, the line would be parallel to the parking lot straight back, okay, I would guess, for the
Do
town
we-
of Milton.
is the Carousel Village in the village?
Part of it,
Some of it, I think.
I think
So
one
go
store,
the other way, Darvin, over across the street, Route 50. See, there we would have an issue too, right there where your finger is.
Yeah.
There we would have an issue because say that strip mall went to shit and we had to tear it all down, and it's not in a very good shape anyways. We couldn't say you gotta push it. I mean, that would have to be back further. There is no parking in the rear because that's a steep hill there
Yeah.
too. So I mean, every decision we make in that area, it all depends on the topography.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Carousel Village is not in the.
So we just have to make
I think
decisions based
well,
on,
I think it's an interesting concept, but I don't know that it relates directly to our particular scenario.
Right.
In my opinion.
So what do we want to tell Chris?
it doesn't make any sense, or where is he talking about?
yeah, did he have a specific property in mind?
I think it came from Maryland, didn't it, Chris?
No, it was part of one of our boards, it was a, highway, and-
Stewart's looking.
Oh,
building,
yeah.
And I thought it was supposed to be on that parcel in front of job lots.
Yeah.
yeah, and
That's- In Chris's mind, I'm pretty sure that's what he was thinking.
yeah, so really what we just said, for lack of anything else, is to put some landscaping in the front of it to keep down the traffic and to keep down the view of the Ocean State and CVS and everything else, because I mean, people do park and ride, and people are gonna park there once the other business comes in.
I mean, when it gets to the planning board, we can, like with Ricketts, we can ask them to try to do something, of course, right? That would be common sense, but I don't know if we should put something in our zoning for that. And as far as the job lot, parking lot, I can't imagine anything going there because it's too steep going down. I mean, anything that would put there, not that down there, I mean, we're just gonna, so,
Getting
above
flooded?
the water.
Agree.
Under current zoning, if someone wanted to put something in Ricketts and they didn't have any variances,
Right? They could.
what would that look like compared to the kind of stuff that we're just talking?
Well,
about?
therein is where the planning board would be very active because it's such an odd shaped
Mhm.
parcel. The design of whatever they wanted to do, okay, would have to be relatively unique. And frankly, I don't know what that would be. Because anyone that's going to do anything with that particular piece of property has to build a retaining wall that's probably 2 football fields long, 5 feet high to keep the land behind it from falling into the parking lot. That expense alone, I think, would probably steer most people away from it. I mean, it may end up, for all I know, it could end up being a park. I mean, we might get a grant to build the wall because it's a state, it's dirty site, okay? Who knows?
Right.
But I don't see basically it'd be a banana shaped building. Okay, it would be very, very difficult for a developer to come in, acquire that, do the necessary site work to get to where it would be buildable, and then create the necessary parking and traffic flow for the planning board to even consider it.
And in that case, parking would have to be in front of the building, not behind the
Right.
building.
Right.
This wouldn't even make sense to put parking behind it.
And then imagining the same thing with this hypothetical situation we were talking about where someone wants to put another building at the front of the job lots parking lot.
Again, it would
It's
depend.
obviously less restricted in terms of what the zoning is right now, but
It would all be about the size of the pad site and what they were gonna put there and la, 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 la.
but there's just trying to imagine if we were to try to say we want something specific in this space versus saying it's the same as all of the rest of our
Well, it's
commercial
all commercial,
districts.
that, at this
Um,
stage of the game, I don't know that that's a whole separate topic again, okay?
Well, but forgetting about the rezoning, just thinking about current, like is there? I'm just trying to think about what the actual advantage, other than it being kind of aesthetically different, there is to having a separate area there.
I'm not sure that I see any, to be honest with you.
Can't imagine it also.
You see it very common in the south, okay, and then in the west where they take, let's say they take a piece of property as big as job lot, all right? And they put a commercial section and some medical offices and the like in front, and then there's a really nice residential neighborhood behind it. But that's minimum job lot size. It would typically be 3 or 4 times the size of that. That's what he's referring to, and I'm sure we've all seen it in our travels. And it works really well. But
We don't really
around
have
here,
any-
I don't see we have any place in,
Yeah, we don't
we
have
could
a
even
place big
consider
enough.
doing it.
All right, so ask Chris, which parcel is he thinking about? Is it the Ocean State job lot? If so, his recommendations sound reasonable. If not, if he's thinking about another parcel, what would they be? And we would need more input and conversation around them.
Mhm.
Sense?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right, I can take that back to Chris. Those are the 2 topics that were on the agenda. Now, we do have 20 minutes. Do we want to question for everybody here? Do we want to table the area in bulk until next meeting? When Jared's here, because I know he wanted to do some analysis and bring up the spreadsheet, kind of walk through it.
Right.
Or do we want to start that conversation now?
It seems if he's gonna walk us through all of the things that we went through,
Mhm.
why would we do that twice? If he wants to.
Well, we would do it now or wait for other folks to be here next.
I would say table it.
Yeah, I would. wait
I
for
would
Jared.
agree.
He's got the information, right?
Well, we all do, but
Wait,
And he's gonna put it up so we can go through it, right? That's what we were gonna
That's what he
do,
was gonna do.
Schedule A or
And the
whatever it
questions
is.
we asked and all of that.
I would just be an opportunistic. We had 20
I don't
minutes.
think we sent anything in the last.
We can make it part of the next agenda, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and we could adjourn early too.
Do we have any other business we'd like to talk about?
And I may have already I may have already asked this and we probably have talked about it. I'm just been very crazy busy. The transition zones, I mean, have we, are those parcels that we know could be issues? Have we identified those with Chris? And I'm specifically, right now, I'm thinking of the Round Street Hospital, the Navy site up there that is zoned R1. Obviously is not R1. Um,
Well, the surrounding it is.
right, but I mean, obviously, nobody's gonna knock that, I would say nobody's gonna knock that down and build houses, so what do,
Would that be part, well, never mind. We're
Yeah,
talking
no.
use.
up there in Rollins Street?
Oh, yes, yes.
The
I mean,
Benedict
there are still
Memorial.
certain parcels that are just like, you know,
And was that entirely in the village? I know. I'm
no,
going by
the rest,
sign.
the little bit is in Milton and that's designated R1 as well. I don't know, there's just some weird parcels out there
So
that,
what would you
I don't know, do we need to,
ask for his recommendation on
on those type of,
transition zone
yeah, on
parcels
those type
similar
of
to
things,
that?
we had talked before when we were looking at the zoning with those, that Angelica, Ricketts, Maplewood. Or are those areas where if somebody wanted to redo them, they would do a PDD? I mean, I guess that would be the question.
Are we gonna have a PDD in our, zoning?
That's up to the village board. But I mean, it makes.
So I think
sense.
that, I think you raise a valid point that we've got several parcels within the village that are,
Unique.
one of these things is not like the other.
Yeah.
The parcel that is, used to be the Rub and Tug and then,
Yes.
is now, it was a motel. And Pete Kutos owns it and now it's,
That's an R1 too, isn't it?
Yeah.
well, yeah,
or
but he
two?
got a use variance to, it's.
Right up behind,
It's
right on
it-
Rollins Street.
You know where the little restaurant used to be that's now has nothing but firewood and.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Across the street from that is a motel,
Oh, yes.
which isn't a motel anymore. It's actually a manufacturing facility or a cooking facility.
Yes.
And they make those little doughboys. Okay, they're sold everywhere.
Last I knew it was owned by Wesley.
Yeah.
No, no,
No.
no, no.
No.
Behind the
No.
gas station.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, it is.
that's owned by Wesley, isn't it?
No.
Wesley
Owned by Pete-
Hospital?
It
Peter-
was
Oh,
at one
Wesley.
by
point.
Pete Kuto. You're talking about the.
It might have been a long
hospital.
time ago.
Yeah, no, this is, the building has a front. It's actually for
Correct.
rent,
Facing
if I'm not
away from
mistaken.
the gas station.
Pardon me?
Facing
Facing
away.
away,
from
like-
the
Away
gas
from the gas
Like
station.
up on the hill. a
It
little
sort
bit.
of do,
I
yeah.
think
So
the
it's the
Dobermans
first,
went into business
no,
now.
it was
Pretty sure they
a
went
motel
out.
at one time. Okay, and he came to the planning board and zoning boards, I gotta say now, 3-4 years ago. And got permission to combine some of the rooms of the motel into an assembly facility for the doughboys that are sold in Stewart's and God, he's got.
They're
grown
at
ge-
Saratoga, yeah.
Yeah, it's grown geometrically, but they rented from Peter because they needed a place to do the work and they couldn't do it in the little shop they had in Saratoga.
Huh.
So that's another
That's-
anomaly.
Yeah,
Um,
South Street School.
yeah, there's another,
Yeah.
there's a big one, okay, so, but again, those are privately owned now properties, okay, that potentially could be sold and developed into what? And so I think that as we look at zoning overall, we need to say, okay, well, if the South Street School, that's a great example, sits in an R1 zone, then it would have to be R1 if it ever stopped being the dance studio, which is all it is.
That would actually be a great place to put in to do,
Condos.
yes, thank you.
It'll,
That
it
would be
it would be
like
lovely.
a church. It would be
okay,
a
but-
great place for someone to put in condos.
every week.
But you know, again, all of that, it seems,
Stafford
is
Gas.
reasonable. I like that.
Yeah, I
There's
mean, that-
parking, there's everything, okay?
And it wouldn't add much to the traffic either.
Correct.
And they have parking.
So those are
Plenty of
just
Well,
the,
they got parking.
those are
Plenty of
just the
parking.
issue, those are those
The building
weird.
is smaller than you think it is from the outside.
Really?
It's still a pretty good sized
Yeah,
building and
it
it's got a
is.
ton of parking. 'Cause it
Reserve
owns a lot
America was
across
huge
the
in
street
there.
because we had to give the guy next door a variance to modify this building to put a
Right.
garage in it, okay, in
Yeah.
order to park his truck because the guy that owns the parking lot kept towing his truck. And, yeah, neighbors are, well, we're a
Right.
village of friends, I think, so. Everything is
Now when it comes to
perfectly
parking,
okay.
What you're
Alright.
saying is this particular area would need a lot more.
I just think that as we look at zoning in terms of saying whether they're districts or areas or however, we need to be cognizant that we've got all of these unusual situations that which the consultant needs to tell us how to deal with.
And it's not just that one spot,
Oh, hell no.
but it's a surprising number of places. And the more and more you list these little things, the more you realize, like
Right.
I think between this conversation, you've listed like,
I can keep.
Yeah.
at
on
least a
going.
dozen.
Well, no,
And it's not just like a two-family and an R1. Those are minor. Those are minor. It's
Right.
these big things, like, what's gonna, you've got,
All right, so this is what I have so far. Transition zone parcels. We have quite a few.
to make a list of. all
Many like
those.
corporate, yeah, if you wanna provide a list, I think that would help.
Yeah, I could do that.
Build Benedict Hospital.
Many,
Big
many
condos.
like the corporate office building, the old Navy Hospital on Rowland Street, South Street School, current sits in R1. How, and more parcels like this, what's the recommendation to address these parcels specifically on possible development in the future? In a transition district with a question mark. And I'll just say Rory to provide.
because that brings up Cunningham's if they ever close.
So,
Cunningham's?
If Cunningham's closes, then
You don't have any plans there.
what's there?
oh,
Because that would be anything other, the traffic would,
To
and it's not even that big.
There's a house, it was two houses, actually it was one house.
again, I think
Long
that,
time.
that it has to be, it has to be a broad enough based concept that's applied to these types of structures that enables creativity to be utilized as opposed to the absolute, you're R1.
Yeah.
Guess what? You need a use variance.
We can't pin you in this hole.
How we deal with that is,
If we keep having to deal with one-off and they're all.
well, no, and they're
Exactly.
in it, well, that's unfortunately, if they were clustered, I would agree with you, but they're not.
They're all over the place.
So that's
Okay,
what I'm
and
saying.
so they become transition districts or something of that
Designated.
nature. Classic example of that is the area directly across from the Price Chopper on Route 50 in Saratoga.
Mhm.
Those were all those little houses, okay,
Right.
there's a little neighborhood behind that, all right? But years ago, the city decided that they would make that a transect zone.
Mm,
All right, which means that the front on Route 50 and the houses behind it are essentially zoned anything a developer comes in and wants to do. You'll notice those big open lots now. That's because the people that own the buildings that were there tore them down to make it A, lower their taxes, and B, enable somebody to envision what they could do in a transect zone.
Where is this? What's
Un-
that?
under-
Right across, right
Boston,
across from the
Boston
Price
Ave.
Chopper on Route 50.
Right, right,
Oh,
SB.
oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, there are,
Yeah.
it's the
Yeah,
only
that's hot.
affordable housing left in Saratoga Springs behind it. But they decided because Espy is the next block over on the right, which is a huge manufacturing facility, it made sense to make that side of the street a transect zone, is what they call it.
Yeah.
Transition, whatever, but it gives what it does is it says, we'll look at virtually anything in there that would be a transition type business.
And now they're gonna put a huge homeless shelter right in the entrance to the city.
Well, good for them, okay?
It actually got voted down.
Oh, did it? Thank
Not in my
God.
backyard, we don't want any homeless people. What's the matter with you?
They said.
Saratoga, that's the way everything's done.
The residents.
But no, the point is the transect or the transition zones, I think are important. And how we would do that in a village that has a variety of different buildings. is a very interesting question for the
Yeah.
consultant.
All right, so
Yes,
if you can give me a list to give, I think, because that list will give Chris specific examples of what we're talking about. 'cause
Sure.
Transition zones in his mind are just like.
You want to send me a
he's gonna look at the
couple
map.
too?
Yeah,
It's gonna
Route
look directly-
50.
He's gonna look at the map, he's gonna have no context.
And
but we
either-
can give him specific.
Yeah, we'll
parcels,
take,
so
I'll,
he knows
I'll,
this is
I'll
what-
absolutely do
make
that.
Rory buy me a drink and we'll talk it over.
I think we can manage that.
All right, so I will also send that off to Chris.
That's good.
Any other topics or before we open up to the public, any public comment, anything else?
I know it wasn't like that
Weapon.
a decade ago.
I just remember seeing a fire.
All right, anything else before we open up public?
You want to say something, Kim? No,
So-
okay, go ahead. Far away.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Anybody in the room, any comments? Yes, Liz, go ahead.
Your open space discussion, I'm in favor of creating for that space. If you want to live right across the street from the soccer field, I would not want that to go into who knows what. And I think it should. like you
Not in
said,
your backyard.
That we don't have a lot of green space. And, I look at the school district is municipal. It's owned by the.
Well, then all we gotta do is just make sure it's clear.
Right.
That's where we're gonna go.
So, you know, the fairground, I look at it a little differently because of the proximity to the housing, you know. There, that might make a good area for single family housing more, you know, we don't get a lot of single family housing developed in this village, so. or
Good place to
maybe
put it.
some Multi-family, anyway, that's my opinion. On your discussion about the commercial zone, I think it would be useful to have that proposed zoning map up so you can see where the borders are. Because I think the commercial zone starts at the street, doesn't it, and goes up either side of 50.
I wasn't exactly sure where it started.
Yeah, so it would be useful to see where it is, because the first part of it is more dense, you know, with where the Ricketts property is, et cetera. And then just before, CVS, you get to that more sort of more typical suburban commercial. I would divide that into two sections, you know, commercial A, commercial B, because for setbacks and everything else, you know, and then have the discussion of, do you want it mixed use, you know, where it is bigger parcels, you want to put one, residential behind it, whereas Ricketts, you're not gonna be able to do that, or down where it's not gonna go in their face and all of that. That whole sort of section around Rowan is kind of mixed use. I mean, they've got all these commercial businesses. And then, you know, it transitions into, so that seems like a potential transition zone where you allow a little bit more variety of things to happen, because there's already a variety.
Anyone else?
I just want to go back a couple things. Eastern Tide, you guys were talking about, that's about the two parcels with about 7 acres. And because it's owned by the school district, when I looked it up online, you guys were talking about it because it's school district, it's considered municipal property, which I understand green space, look at that, and I know that it gets to be a tricky situation having property that has been under people who wanted to purchase and other people didn't want it to be purchased, so I understand it's along private property, like you said. Situation, it's supposed to do, but it is, according to this, when I looked it up, it is considered municipal property. Fairgrounds looks like County of Saratoga owns it, it's 118 acres, so it'd be considered New York government lands.
Excuse me, it's not owned by the county, it's owned by the agricultural district, it's not owned by Saratoga County.
Okay, because it says on a few different things that I was looking up, while you guys were talking, that it said it's Saratoga County. And then looking up while you guys were talking about Ted's Fish Fry and the Ocean State Job Lot property, like a little over almost 5 acres of land, but the Ted's Fish Fry looks like the Ocean State Job Lot is not part of their property to park on. So that was kind of like, as you guys were talking about that, and I guess talking about the bigger properties, like you said, the former Benedict Memorial, the South Street School, to pigeonhole those properties from the people who own them into making it into a residential, or forcing them into a residential when it hasn't really been residential. If they try to sell it, I think that can also be, so I think it's good to be looking at it, see what we can do with those type of properties. And Cunningham's isn't gonna solve, even though Rite Aid came in years ago and he was not looking to sell it at that point in time, but they offered
I
him
hope he
money.
never does.
But I know it is we have been in a bad spot for many years in the Village of Boston Spa, or Mr. Wilson, who owned it before us, was bad thing. So the village, a lot of problems with that property. And it's still in a residential area and should be a commercial area. It's been that way since, when did they turn it into a Chrysler Plymouth, 40s, I think in the 1940s, it was a Chrysler Plymouth dealership. So it's been around for a long time in that spot and should be part of the commercial or the central business district.
But isn't that part of the Route 50 corridor, which is the commercial business district?
That doesn't go that far. Doesn't go that far.
That's the one you're talking about.
On Route 50,
Yeah, is that zoning? Oh,
it's, I forget, it's
Yeah.
not zoned properly.
I
It
thought,
should be
I'll just
highway.
say that, it's not
Oh,
zoned
the highway,
properly. for
yeah.
business.
It's
It's been there since the 40s.
we'll check it, because I think it is highway.
yeah.
All right, any other comments? Jen, anybody on the call?
Hold on, it takes me a minute to hit all the buttons. No, there is no one else on the call.
All right, well then we will adjourn. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Merry Christmas, Jen.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, guys. Happy holidays.